One.
Hi. Welcome to another episode.
Yes, we support each other as much as we can. So I appreciate that. Hey, sis, really us doing the work so that we are creating space for ourselves to heal and also for the generations before us.
I'm here to challenge you to do it a little different this year. I am actually challenging you to do the work from the inside out. All right, let's get into it.
Hi. Hello. This welcome to another live with Hanifa Nayela. I am your host, Hanifa Nayela. Today we are here to talk about therapy and why therapy is almost like the new sexy. Okay. So we're gonna get into that. But I'm gonna let some others get in the room before we delve right into it. Before I do anything else, I want to make sure that I go over a few house rules. So I'm gonna make sure that I put my little warning on the bottom. This information may be triggering. Please view at your discretion. Okay. I like to put that warning up because I don't want people to walk into the conversation and it's like, oh my gosh, what are they discussing? I'm triggered. So
Yeah.
and then they never come back. So to
Exactly.
avoid that, yeah, I'm making sure that I let people know ahead of time. That's often helpful. And then also, if you are just joining us and you are not a subscriber as yet, please go back out, subscribe, go back out, wipe your feet, subscribe, and come on back in and join the conversation. Share if you feel like it's information that other people on your social media platform should hear. And if you feel like following me, follow me on Instagram at the real Hanifa Nayela. And also, people usually who ask if you feel generous and you want to give a donation, my cash app is at the bottom of the stream. It is Hanifa Nayela, $ Hanifa Nayela. So feel free to drop a dime, a nickel, a quarter in there. No pressure, but I'm always grateful for my little cash app as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and see who is here with us today. So as usual, we have Inya, always here supporting us, always here showing her love. Um, we appreciate you, Anya. Thank you for passing through. And then we have she says she's looking forward to this. We have Arshan. He says he's listening in between something else. That's cool, Arshan. It must be real. You're so blessed to be able to multitask. Not everyone can do that. Okay. So I appreciate you kind of like, allowing us to join your juggle today. Appreciate that. And then we have Tiffany. She says, hey, Tiffany. Thank you for all the love and support as usual. Thank you for being here. And then I see Luke Cassidy. Good
Okay.
idea to have the trigger notice. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I try to play it safe. Thank you for being here, sis, and passing through and showing some support. So let's get right into it, Curtis. We have Kurt Ball. Kurt Ball here with us today, and we are going to delve into this topic of therapy. I wanted to talk about this because I feel like this is a good thing actually, a new wave of you should go to therapy. Like we're finding more Black people being able to actually say that to each other without someone being offended or feeling labeled as crazy, right? Because there was a time where you say you're in therapy, it was kind of hush hush because you don't want to be labeled as, oh, you crazy. So, but our people have grown, are evolving past that. We still have a long way to go though, but our people are growing and evolving past that. And so I'm excited to see that but I specifically wanted to have a guy on here to talk about this because I feel like it's still sort of taboo with our black men as well. And we are going to get into that. So, Curtis, why don't you first start by telling people who you are, what you do, and why this topic of therapy is so important to you?
All right. Well, both professional and personal reasons. Firstly, can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's a little low, but I can hear you. If you
Okay.
if you in the chat, if you guys feel Curtis is low, just let us know in the chat. Go ahead, I can hear you.
Okay. So yes, I've always been interested in psychology, and I've always been a well-rounded healthcare professional. So I have educate background, minor education in psychology, and when I was in medical school, I did psychiatry. Okay, so that's the educational background portion of it, and that's actually the least amount of what I do. I do 100% of things that I do. I would say 5% of it's psychology, 5% of it is psychiatry. The other 90% of it is just simply life experience.
Mhm.
And I've been going to therapy since I was 22. I had a panic attack at that time. And at that time, we didn't have words like trigger. This was in 1991. We had the only term there was panic disorder. And it was still a matter of lecture for hospital residents to attend it because essentially no one really knew what was going on at that time, or its link, or the links between anxiety and depression, or medicinal strategies that didn't produce abuse and addictive episodes. Okay, so that was how I started going through therapy, was to cope with the anxiety. And since then, because that's a chronic problem, it can be acute, and you can feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, you might hit 10 because you feel triggered. But in general, you tend to sit and live somewhere around a 5. And so that requires medicinal management regularly over time. And that's why I like the title that you have, therapy is a whole vibe, because it has been a whole vibe. It's been a whole lifestyle. And I've had a chance to evolve with the vibe and the lifestyle over the course of the last 31 years now. And it's not something that I would ever change. I plan on continuing to go to therapy till the end of life. Because even once we get past that initial problem that we went through, that doesn't mean that everything is done. And even if you do feel like everything is done, I still encourage people to go. Just maintenance, mental hygiene. Treated no differently as a dude brushing my teeth or doing the laundry at this.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because when you said it's a lifetime, it's a lifestyle.
Yes.
It should be a part of your self-care package. And we're going to get into different types of therapy as well. But I agree with that because here's the funny thing, life can be tough sometimes,
Yes.
and so you, even though you might be going to therapy for one thing, no one who is to say that there is not going to be another traumatic event later on in your life, right? So it's good to have already been, acclimated, or with the idea of therapy, so that when these things come up, you're like, okay, I need to unpack this, so let me go. You are a little bit less apprehensive to seek assistance, right? Because you've already done that. So because I know people who will be in therapy and then they will stop, right? Because they walk through some things, and then something else will come up and they'll say, okay, I need to call my therapist. I think that's so cool, right? To
Yes.
like just kind of always have that in your pocket,
Mhm.
whereby somebody's like, okay, I need to call a friend so I could process this, and that happens. But being able to acknowledge when it's a little deeper than just a conversation with a friend, right? Where you need some clinical assistance in really sorting out the laundry of the situation, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing that you just said, that it's a lifetime thing, because I think life teaches us that life is very cyclical,
Yes.
in the sense that I was just telling someone today, you're good today, you're great tomorrow, next time you're not so good,
Hmm.
next time you're in the dirt. And
Yeah.
then you got to come right back around again. You're good, you're great. Like that's life, right? There are
Yes.
seasons and cycles in life. So therapy should be a part of our
Yes.
self-care routine. So Curtis, tell me, were you, I know you said you started in your 20s,
Uh,
right?
age 22,
Age
and what triggered it, right, was graduating university, moving to New York, and being ready to start my dream job the next day. The job that I had been building myself for since
Mhm.
age 12. So I see how I can look back now and see how I felt a lot of pressure on me, excitement, but also pressure that I didn't even realize was there.
Okay.
And so I was very excited. And then next thing I felt the pressure, then the panic attack, and then the trip to the hospital.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was brutal. And the thing about friends, because it is good to talk to a friend, but
Mhm.
the important thing about therapy too is friends might not always understand. You know, they either might not always understand, or they may understand, but they may not be able to cope in that moment. But as always, you have people around you who do, who can cope in that moment. And when you've been going to therapy long, you build relationships. And as you know, Hanifa, I like to stress our relationships. You know, not just intimate relationships, but
Yeah.
all of our relationships in our lives, because they're all combined. They combine to make us who we are and how we interact with everyone around us and in society. But yes, that's that those were the events and those were my reactions. And so after that, I ended up going to a clinic that was associated with the job that I had, and that helped me to get back on an even keel very fast and get right back into that dream job.
So
Mhm.
did someone, when you had the anxiety attack, did someone recommend therapy to you?
No, I knew already because of education. So I knew already that, okay,
Yes. Okay.
yes, it was that bad to the point where it was obvious, and there was no ignoring it.
Okay. Okay. So was there like at that point, because it sounded like education, you were already armed with some knowledge. So
Yeah.
that made the the transition a little bit easier. But
Yes.
were there any like was there any feelings of shame or embarrassment as a black man having to seek out therapeutic help? Were you
Yes.
open in telling people that you were in there, or were you like, when someone say, "Where you headed?" You're like, "I'm just going over here to an appointment."
Yes. It was a mix of a lot of both, because
Okay.
I of my own accord, I'm an open book, but being an open book with people who don't understand means that you can be open book with people who don't understand but are quick to judge.
Yeah.
That was very hard, especially at a time when nobody really understood what was going on. And we have a much better understanding now because 3 decades later. And
Right.
so, but more than anything else, that lent to me a sense of empathy, a greater sense of empathy, and a greater sense of compassion, as well as the need to continue learning. Uh, it Anxiety can feel very bad, but when you go through it enough, hello, but when you go through it enough, you start to see that it's really an overreaction to whatever stimulus is bothering you. For me, instance, that excitement, was all of a sudden magnified into fear and then anxiety. And then you come back down again, and then it's like you said, the following day you might not be feeling so well again. And so you cycle through it until you get good management. In my case,
Mm.
it's regular therapy as well as regular medical management, and that allows me to function at my highest capacity. Now more than ever, I'd say. Mhm.
Okay. So can you tell me, okay, so let's talk about therapy within our culture,
Hmm.
right? Because I think I said this on one show. Before I do it, I saw some new people come in. I want to make sure I shout them out. Hey AR, now that I know this is AR, I'm just gonna go ahead and say, hey him and versus her solutions. Thank you for passing through and showing some love. Much appreciated. I'm gonna come back to Tiffany's. Danique passed through and said big up at Hanifa and Kurt. Blessing to the entire chat party. Tiffany mentioned exactly, Hanifa, at another traumatic event can occur in life. I did therapy for about 2 years, and now that I don't have the same insurance, I am wishing I could still call my therapist now. So I want to get into that as well. So I was one where, I'm listen, I'm the type of person that people want to talk to about stuff because
Hmm.
I'm very like welcoming. I have a very welcoming energy, and you know, um, for the most part, I try to maintain a non-judgmental stance. I am human, so it doesn't mean that I won't be triggered sometimes by maybe something that's said. I'm doing better in that space, but because I know I give off that energy to both men and women, I know I'm not a clinician, so I'm very careful to how far I'm willing to take someone, right? I feel like we have to be aware of our boundaries, okay? Our limitations. That's the word, right?
Hmm.
So I am not willing to take you, Curtis, to the edge and leave you there,
No, not.
right?
Mm-mm.
Right? Because now you jump. you
No.
know
Yeah.
because I don't know what else to do, so I'm very careful with that. So
Yeah.
I've always been one to say, okay, this is as far as I can take you in
Yeah.
conversation, in support, and then I might say, okay, this person needs therapy. Okay, have you tried talking to someone and so forth? I find myself a little bit hesitant in saying that so quickly these days, because I kind of had to check my privilege around that. And I realized that the access that we assume everyone has, everyone does not have. Um, and also, everyone does not have the education. Like you said, for you, you already had the education. Everyone does not have the education around therapy, especially if we come from a culture where you don't air dirty laundry, right?
Yeah.
um Going to someone who is a stranger and talking about your mama, or your dad or your uncle that touched you,
Mhm.
that just doesn't look too appealing to
No.
a lot of people who culturally, that's just not what we do, right?
Mhm. Right.
What Why do you think? What are some of the other reasons that you've seen? Let's talk about men, because you're a guy.
Mhm.
What are some of the other barriers that you've seen for black men going to therapy? Like, what are some of the things that you see hinder our
Mhm.
black men from embracing the idea of therapy?
Well, I think the first thing is being raised male. We tend to be raised with this attitude like, I don't need any help. I'll fix it myself. I remember I used to have, and please forgive me if I laugh or if it seems like any of my laughter is inappropriate. It's me laughing at my own history and learning experience over the course of time. But to say that I've heard every excuse in the book might be an understatement. Why do you need to go to therapy? You can diagnose yourself. Well, no, you can't. Um, um, the, well, it's like, well, you don't need to do that. Well, maybe you should just get a good night's sleep. Well, you'll wake up with the same symptoms, if not worse. And, and it's like, well, what's wrong with you? What did you do and that's the biggest one, the blame thing. Because sometimes a lot of people tend to think that you must have done something to hurt yourself and
Right.
suffer as you do. And they don't really understand that it's simply just a genetic predisposition triggered by something in the environment. And I can say that matter of factly, but when we're around people who would normally say, huh? What do you mean? What did you just say? Or family, as you just alluded to, the one thing I used to hear a lot was, well, we don't put our business out in the street.
Mhm.
And I spent a good time. 'Cause I've come from a large family, so I spent some time trying to explain to family members that our business isn't out in the street. My business is in a clinic with the doctor.
Yeah, Curtis, you mentioned something and you started off, which I think was really good because I was just like, yes, where you just said, part of it is that we're born male.
Yes.
Period. Like that alone, we could talk about that for a whole hour and what that means, right? Because you're right. I mean, the big part of it is how our young boys who then grow up to be men are socialized, particularly in this society, right?
Mhm.
So what the question that came to my mind when you said that is therapy seen as soft? Is
Um,
it seen as a more feminine thing?
in my experience, that used to be the case
Okay.
because, especially with anxiety, I guess maybe about 100 years ago, it was still being referred to as "quote unquote" the woman's disease. And I'm glad we no longer live in that kind of age, because that is absolutely brutal. I can't imagine at that because at that time, like say in the late 1800s,
Mhm.
they were over medicating women, and that produced a lot of women morphine addicts. And men, I like to, in my opinion, I do think that that does speak to things like crime rate, especially, especially in developing areas. And at that time, the country was still going through a lot of development.
Mhm.
And so here you have men who weren't being treated, who didn't think they needed to be treated. And in my experience, when men are not treated, eventually you will get to a point where it will lead to acts of violence.
That's true.
Yes, and that's the thing that I find the most concerning dealing with men, because if you feel soft about therapy and you feel hard about an act of violence, I don't know how you'll feel when you end up in a jail cell. And that's the truth. And we know how much bias there is out there. There's already bias against Black men, and we know full well that that's the case. And we're still climbing out from under it. So my philosophy has become very simple. If you need the help, ask. It's not always easy, but if it's necessary, it's necessary. And the thing that you want to do always is your goal is always reclaim my life, or what is the other saying? Take my power back.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's the other one. Because
yeah.
if you're laying on the floor like I was in the fetal position, not knowing what you're going through, that's as powerless as you can feel. You
Mm-hmm.
know? But 2 weeks later, and with good management, and took a few days to myself, then I felt like me again. And then it was time to get on with life and pursuing the dreams that I had set for myself. And that's when I realized because over the course of 6 months, like as we all know, less than 6 months, these conditions are referred to as acute, and greater than 6 months, they're referred to as chronic. And so in my case, once we hit the 6 month mark, it was like, what's going on? What am I going through? Why am I going through this? And and back then we were working with such a paucity of understanding. I went through a number of things, including feelings like, why does God hate me? What did I do wrong? Things like that. Until you get used to talking it out and calming down and engaging in other techniques like breathing exercises to calm down that kind of thinking, because medicine alone is not sufficient. Therapy alone, in my experience, has not been sufficient. But the combination of both together is what I consider to be good medical management, good total treatment.
So one of the things you talked about was acts of violence, and usually, like, there are, right, like specifically in social media spaces, we see what they have labeled the gender war. And
Yes.
usually when we hear some woman talk about specifically Black men, one of the things that's often talked about is the violence that Black men commit. And I am one. Okay, so I am of the mind that people often extract stuff to create that supports the narrative that they want to push. I'm
Yes.
the why person. So when you say Black men are committing high, like, high rates of crime, I
Mhm.
want to know why. Why
Yes.
Black men and not Black women, right? And one of the things you just mentioned that I personally believe is that there are no real outlets. And so what happens to that pain and that hurt that oftentimes our men are, like you said, because they were born male,
Mhm.
right, have to have had to carry since they were children,
Yeah.
because there's been no safe outlet or safe spaces, whether it be in the home, in the community, in the school, in the church.
Mhm.
Okay, that's a whole other conversation there as well, Funky.
Right.
That's a whole other conversation, because people talk about why the Black church is predominantly woman.
Hmm.
We have to get to the why that is, right? And I think you said a very important thing is where we are born male. And I'm going to take it a little further and say that you are born Black males.
Blackmail. Yes.
Yes, and what that means and what that looks like. And so I think the conversation that a lot of our women who have a disdain for Black men, who have a narrative that they want to push because of their own hurt, by the way, and their own pain, sometimes at the hands of Black men, whether it be family members. Usually it is first their family members, the Black men in their families, right?
Yes.
And they're carrying that. So they now want to extract certain things about Black men or certain behaviors that they're observing so that they could push a narrative. But I'm just like, well, let's talk about the why. What type of society do our men find themselves in, right? To where that it is not safe for them to even express certain emotions, right? It's just not safe to do so. What
Yeah.
happens when they do not release that? Where does that go? And so you touched on it a little bit and you said, it then becomes acts of violence. But here's what I said to that. Um, the act of violence committed is
Mhm.
the internalization of the pain. That's
Yeah.
the first act of violence, the act
Yeah.
of violence against self.
Hmm.
Because now you have internalized that pain, and that pain is wreaking havoc on your psyche, on your physical, on your spiritual. That is the first act of violence. And then we see it manifest against each other in the community. So if
Yeah.
you could expound on that a little bit, and still connecting it back to therapy as far as Black men in this society, right? And what do you mean when you say then that quickly becomes, or that becomes violence? Why does pain or hurt internalized become violence when it is coming from the bodies of Black men?
I think it's because we learn how to fight. I'm being age 53 and being Generation X. Honestly, when we grew up, you had to learn how to fight with your fists. If you didn't know how to fight with your fists, you were going to be bullied, bullied,
Mm-hmm.
bullied
Mm-hmm.
in ways that no one can live with. And at that time, because in my life, we're talking about the 70s. When people didn't even think of these things or didn't think of them as that bad. Only for us to know now, we've evolved so much more to know that it actually is, that there's actually a lot of internal pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you realize that, hey, or as a man, I'm feeling all of this internal pain and I don't know what to do with it. It's like we're talking about the lashing out. Well, like you just said, I normally call that lashing in.
Yes.
And some of us, we tend to lash in first and then we lash out. Others just lash out automatically and never lash in. And so that's what I think it is. When you've beaten yourself and beaten yourself, and this is just my opinion,
Yeah.
but when you've beaten yourself and beaten yourself and beaten yourself up to death, God, why me? What did I do? What did I do wrong? Why did my significant other leave me behind this? Why is my family not talking to me behind this? And all of a sudden you become closed off and isolated. And at that point, if you've been carrying it around too long, woe to the person who tries to help you,
Yeah.
because the person who tries to help you may be taking a chance. One of the first things that I had seen in a another patient who was doing very bad. I think he had some issues. I think his was with schizophrenia. Okay, but anytime someone walked towards him in a white coat, he was in a wheelchair, but he would kick his leg out, just kick him right in the gut or right in the groin, and that was his reaction to his healthcare team. And to the point where he sent a couple doctors home for the day, with that much violence, and that was in the hospital.
Mm.
So that's what I think it was. Whereas prior to the doctors coming over to see him, he was just giggling. He was just giggling, enjoying conversation with everyone else like it was nothing. And so I think it's a lot of things, and it's really hard to just, like we said, we want to deconstruct everything in this conversation. We'd be here all night and well into the next morning.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to ask one more thing, but let me make. I saw hey chef, I saw chef come in the room. Peace of love and light to Hanifa, Nayela, brother Kurt, and the entire chat. Peace to you as well, chef. Good to see you. Thank you for passing through and your support. Chef said, "Get the likes up." So listen, if you're in here, and you have not hit the like button. Go on back. Go on back outside and hit the like button and come on back in here and let's finish this conversation. Appreciate you guys as usual. Curtis.
And may I
So
may I
go ahead.
may I interject just one thing here,
Sure.
please, Hanifa, on behalf of your show. For new viewers who may not be familiar or may not be familiar with the work you do, or the implications of the work you do, I would like to stress to everyone that this is it's a very hard job. It's it is, and for what you give for free, to anyone who needs it, I would like to really stress to everyone just how much she's giving. On the scale of 1 to 10, she's giving a 10 for free. Okay, and so that's the truth. Um,
Yeah.
People do this for a living, and it is not easy at all. I've watched so many people get worn out and have to quit. And as you see, I've been watching Hanifa for, I think, what, 4 years now, and that's with no quit in sight. And I think if it'd be fine if I share with you, like when it comes to a woman's topic. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this, but being a man, I'm not the right one to address it. Then I would send it over to you, right? But we were constantly doing that because we were very gender sensitive. Not because we were sensitive towards gender, but because we know the people that we're talking to and there's a lot of sensitivities as well as the trigger warning you put up. And so I just want the audience to really understand just the kind of care that is taken. And if we can shrink it into 3 words, those 3 words are do no harm.
Mm.
It doesn't get any more important than that. A lot of people want to help, but without knowing how to help, you run the risk of doing harm. And so if you don't know how to help, quickly ask someone who does. Even if you have to call 911 and call an ambulance.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to get help. So I
Thank
just
you for
want to make sure I said that, please. Thank you.
thank you for that, Curtis. I just have a question. So okay. So I'm of the mind that Black people are just the spiritual people in general.
Yes.
Okay, just always have been. Um, Now, do you think that I have my well? A part of me feels like some of the apprehension around therapy is also connected to our spirituality as well. A lot of us grew up learning to leave it at the altar,
Mm.
um, take it to the Lord,
Mm.
and wait.
Yeah.
The Lord is going to fix it. When it comes to things that happen to us in our lives, and speaking specifically about Black people, we
Mhm.
are a very much get over it culture,
Yeah.
keep it moving culture. Let the Lord handle it. How much does, I don't even want to necessarily say spirituality, but how much does religion
Yes.
get in the way of our people seeking out therapy?
Honestly, to be quite honest, for people who are really religious, it will 100% get in the way. 100%
Mm,
get in the way.
okay.
And because if you're waiting for God, and if you have an absolute faith in God, and to the point where your interpretation is that I have to wait for God to help me, then we forget a couple of things. And I think it's time, like for myself, I tend to try to expand on some of these religious things. When someone says, "Well, I'm waiting for God," and it says, "Yes, but God also helps those who help themselves." And in this one, you're gonna have to help yourself. You're gonna have to make a decision. God is still there. You're not ignoring God, but you're utilizing more of the resources that God has had laid out for you that you might not have known were already there, that are there to help you. And that's what you can thank God for. And the other was people who say, I don't want to go to the doctor. I don't need to go to the doctor. God's going to help me. To which my response is, yes, but God created doctors. God created therapists. God, if God has created everything around us, then these are the resources that are given to you. It's no different than that old adage of the guy sitting on the roof when the flood comes and he prays to God for a rescue. A boat comes by, he doesn't take that one, he's waiting for God. Second boat comes by, he waves that one off, he's waiting for God. Third boat comes by, same thing, he's waiting for God. Then he's like, God, why hast thou forsaken me? And God's like, I sent you 3 boats. And I think that's a really good analogy for how people
I came through 3 times, sir. 3 times.
yeah. And I try to tell people that being as God comes through, or God sends his servants through that many times, then it stands to reason that the only person left that needs to get on board is the person who's suffering himself or herself.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, when I was coming to do this conversation with you, I started to think of like, and you can answer this. Is there, because when we talk about therapy, the therapy, first of all, let me say shout out to Abraham. Abraham, hi, Abraham. Thank you for passing through. Thanks for the support, sir. Quick question. I see Kendra just came in. Greetings, Hanifa and Mr. Curtis. Hey, Kendra, thank you for passing through. Oh, you guys are showing the love out here. Yes, Inya. I did a show with another sister. Is what he's referring to. And yeah, it was just really, it was very black centered. Um, very pro-black, very focused on the community and just trying to tackle taboo topics that our community often run away from. So that's
Yeah.
what Curtis is referring to. And so I'm coming out of that and kind of like doing my own thing here in YouTube, in the YouTube space. So I'm still new in this space. So no, I don't do it. I no longer do it. No. So I kind of branched off. The sister, she's been on the show, Sister Alkama. You've seen her. She's called Miss Frida People. She's often she usually passed through. Very, very much still my sister. Yeah. So that's what he's referring to, just to answer your question.
Yes.
So Curtis, so I was thinking, I was really trying to get ready for our conversation, and I was thinking, like, when we tell people about therapy, we're often, the picture that comes to mind, right? What thought it evokes is one of someone in an office. You might be on a couch, okay, you might be in a chair, but it's always that sort of, it evokes a thought of a specific environment and space.
Yes.
What I want to talk about is, are there different forms of therapy, or are we just focused on the clinical therapy? Are there other forms, are there other things that people can do that can be therapeutic? because I feel like in our community, they exist and we tap into them.
Mm-hmm.
But the clinical piece of it is what often scares people away. Like, for example, I think music is a tool of therapy,
Yes.
right? Because of the frequency, certain frequencies, right? So music with certain frequencies can actually heal an individual, right? Can bring about transformation within a person's psyche, within a person's body, can actually begin to change the thought process of a person, right? That's music. That's just one tool, right? I think exercise, yoga, I think these can all be tools. Meditation are all tools of therapy. I know I've heard of people who never sat in a therapist's chair and yet was still able to heal themselves by
Yeah.
doing some intense shadow work outside of the clinical office, right? And I'm one for therapy. I'm not anti therapy. I am just curious as to, are we too focused on one type of therapy? That's one question. And if so, should we be open to other forms or other tools, therapeutic tools? And what are those that maybe some that you have experienced? What are those tools? Are we too focused on one form? That's one question. And then the second one is, if so, what are other forms of therapy that we
Yeah.
can tap into?
No, I don't think that we concentrate too much on one form.
Okay.
I think if we look at the world as a whole and different cultures, different cultures have different methodologies. Like my preference is for the allopathic medicine that we go through, such as to see a psychologist, the psychiatrist, and because that's the modality that I come from, and therefore I trust and am most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe that there is a huge trust factor
Yes.
there. It's which methodology do you trust? Does that methodology work for you? If it does, you'll stick with it. If it doesn't, you may want to try something else.
Mm-hmm.
And as for the different various techniques, we tend to call them coping strategies, such as every one that you just mentioned. And one else I wanted to put in there that I felt worked well for me was diet.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes. Switching to a plant-based diet and then switching it fully into a vegetarian diet. And I found that that lifted a decent amount of the depression. I wish I could give you a sort of a round number if I could, because I'm speaking anecdotally. I think that the change in diet alone contributed to a 30% reduction in both the anxiety and the depression.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was my experience. So if someone says, should I stop eating meat? Get rid of the red meat. If you're anything like me, get rid of the red meat. I promise you'll feel better in about a month.
Well, it's funny because I'll say, first of all, let me just make sure I shout out the new people in the room. I see Sir Hale speak. He says, salute to Hanifa. Hi, Sir Hale. Thank you for passing through. Thank you for the continued support. I really do appreciate you, sir. I saw my ad come in. She said, peace to the chat. Peace to Sister Hanifa and Brother Curtis. I want to make sure that I shout everyone who comes in that I haven't shouted out yet. Interestingly, you talk about diet. Now, if anyone have fasted, anyone have cut out, fasted in the sense of like people tend to do that like around Lent and so forth, if you're religious. Anyone who has done any length of fasting, whether it's abstaining from certain foods for a length of time or abstaining from food, period, for a couple, you already know, okay, the automatic changes that you start to feel, right? One of the main ones is clarity of mind. So when you bring up diet as a therapeutic tool, I can see that because I come from a background of fasting, and I know when I'm fasting, like my connection to spirit is so much stronger,
Yes.
right? My downloads are so much clearer. Whatever messaging, whatever communication between spirit and I, so much clearer. Okay, the
Yeah.
clarity is beyond.
It is.
The energy, and when I say energy, the way that you interact with other people,
Yes.
right? You just kind of more on a more peaceful, wavelength. So when you talked about the therapeutic aspect of what we consume, what
Yes.
goes into our mouths, right? And
Mhm.
how it affects our thinking, how we feel, how we express what we feel,
Mhm.
all of those things. And people don't consider that. So I'm glad that you actually mentioned the diet piece as a therapeutic tool. You had said something earlier. I may come back to it because now I cannot remember what it was, and I wanted to ask you about that. But if you want to expound more on the dietary piece and
Mhm.
how it has helped you, because you said your thing is anxiety. Am I correct? It's anxiety?
It's bipolar disorder type 1. So,
Bipolar disorder type
mhm,
1. Okay.
yes. And so, for people who might not be familiar with that term, the old term for it was manic depression. So I cycle through anxiety, depression, anxiety, depression, and that's if I'm not in treatment or taking my medicine. That's exactly what will happen. And I am student enough at this point, certainly, to know that that cycle will not change. It has decreased, the symptomatology has decreased across the course of my life. But do I think it will ever go away? No. It's been 30 years now out of 53. I think it's a good idea to plan that it's going to continue, but that doesn't mean that I have to stop continuing.
So, okay, so I'm gonna ask you this. But before I do that, I see some new people came in. I want to make sure I shout them out. Sister George, she says, "Hi, Hanifa." Hey, Sister George, good to see you, and thank you for the support, sis. Thank you for the love and the support. And I want to get to some of these comments at some point as well, so I'm gonna go back up. But um, I'm gonna ask this because I asked Natasha when she was on here, and her diagnosis was bipolar as well. I
It
don't know
was
the exact term, right?
hers was bipolar disorder type 2.
Type 2. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you this.
Mhm.
You said it's been what, 30 years?
31 years.
How does that affect your dating life? Is that something that you have to bring, you've had to mention?
Uh, it depends on the relationship. Like,
Okay.
so if it's a date or something, no, I wouldn't bring it up so early. But if we're past like the dating phase and in a relationship, then I will definitely bring it up. Now, that's the answer that I put on paper. Okay. The real answer is this. Sweetie, I'm 53 years old. I'm too tired to play games. You know what I mean? I'm not going to play games with you. You know, I do go through anxiety, and usually the response right there is, me too. And
Oh my
oh,
gosh. I'm so glad you said that. Go ahead. I'm so glad you said
yes,
that. Go ahead.
exactly. So, so when we talk about, and the shame and the stigma, and stuff like that, that's really the best reason to end these things, because so many of us go through it. And over the years that I've been going through it, I started hearing more and more people, even the same family members who in a group would be very upset with me, individually would come back and say, I understand now. I know what you feel like. I know what you feel like. It's like, why were y'all jumping down my throat? I was about to leave you all and not come back.
Well, everyone kind of have their own journey, right?
Yes.
And we are not all arriving at certain places at the exact same time. And so
Yes.
it's very interesting how you can be on your journey and you hit a certain space and someone is like, what are you doing? You're crazy. And whatever that is. And
Yeah.
then as you continue forward, all of a sudden like I said, life is cycles. You come right back around on your cycle and you meet that person. And it's
Yeah.
a totally different person, and their perception, their ideas, their thought process around that particular topic that you guys were discussing, maybe even 12 months ago, have completely changed because now they had to go and sought help out for themselves, right? So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because when you said, it's often like, oh, me too.
Mm-hmm.
I say this all the time. Like, the best way for you to not like go hard at people is
Mm-hmm.
to just assume that that person has their own issues too.
Yes.
Period. Like, that's
You
what
know, it's
helps
true.
me show grace or approach people in a certain way. I make
Yeah.
assumptions. Judge me for making assumptions. I know they say you shouldn't make assumptions, but in this case, this is what
Yeah.
helps me. Anyone I meet in the street, in the traffic, when people are on the road cursing, and I
Mm-hmm.
always say, when you see someone upset, whatever that is, my first thing is usually, unless my children are involved and you are trying to harm them, and
Yeah.
that's rarely the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm in a supermarket and someone is upset, highly upset, my first reaction is not to try to meet them
Mm-hmm.
there or outdo them.
Mm-hmm.
My reaction usually is to maintain where I'm at and see if I can bring them there.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I don't know what they're going through. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what's going on with them. I don't know if they're out of medication and they're having a hard time affording more medication. So they're just out of balance, whatever that may be. I just make assumptions. Okay? So
Yes.
it helps me to approach everyone in a very respectful, calm, non-judgmental way, because the truth is, Curtis, people are going through out here.
Oh yeah.
Okay?
Oh yeah.
Yes, people are going through. We are all going through, and then we see each other, and we make these assumptions. It's like, Curtis, you wear a tie, you dress a certain way, nothing is wrong with you. You're perfect. I think I brought this up on my Facebook. The one sister that they said she committed suicide. Do you remember the pageant queen?
Yes.
Okay, and so the conversation that was taking place around her death, I found that it was so problematic, right?
Yes.
Because people just was like, what issues could she possibly have
Mm-hmm.
based on the way she looked?
Yes. And
So she's attractive,
mm-hmm.
so she has no struggle.
Mm-hmm.
She's a beauty queen, so she has no problems. Like, her life is perfect. You want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Yes, all of the. I think we all know that all of those are false assumptions, and we already have ready-made answers for those. It's like, well, how could how could she commit suicide when she's so pretty? Well, she's not looking at herself being so pretty. She's looking around at a world that she feels is ugly, and she's feeling herself on the inside and feeling like she's ugly. When she looks in the mirror, she probably doesn't see a beautiful woman, even though everybody else does, because she feels ugly about herself. And so what's dystonic there is her relationship with herself.
Mm-hmm.
And also people who don't know her are trying to project their feelings onto her, not real and not being open to receive what she's trying to project. She may be trying to say, help me, help me, help me, but might not know how. And she's hoping that you understand. And that's what I think happens in a lot of these cases. With mine, it was, well, you just graduated university. What are you complaining about? Or you just got your dream job at this institution that we've been hearing about. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
I'm not complaining. I'm telling you that I'm human and I'm going through something I've never experienced or heard of ever before or anything like that. So, it also reminds me of Phil Hyman, who's been celebrated during this month as well, because she had committed suicide secondary to mental illness as well. And she struggled mightily at the end of her life. And one of the things that people would say about her was, and it doesn't matter how intelligent they are, how educated they are, a lot of people tend to assume, well, how could she be so sad and depressed if she had all that money? And it's like, let's go back to kindergarten. Remember when we learned money can't buy, remember we learned money can't buy happiness? Well, it couldn't buy her happiness.
Was that kindergarten?
Exactly. It's like if you have $100 in your pocket or a nickel in your pocket, neither of those amounts are going to buy you any happiness.
Yeah.
You can be as rich as Jeff Bezos, or as poor as somebody on the street. And the bottom line is neither one of those ways can buy you happiness. They don't.
since you brought up suicide, we know that the rate in suicide among Black men has
Yes.
been increasing. And do you think a part of why, because we talked about not Black men not having those outlets, Black men, the way that men are socialized, just the fact that you guys are male, right? We can start there. How much do you think, if I could be honest, and I might be a little, I don't think I'm biased. I think this is my observation. I'm a boy mom. And when I say this, people have a hard time accepting this. People don't give a shit about Black men.
No, they don't.
I'm being very honest when I just have to say that people do not give a damn about Black men. Like, you guys can be in the mud, okay? You guys better not scream for help, because if you even ask for help, okay, oh, what in the beta simp?
Yeah,
these are the new words. These are the new words. What in the beta simp, anti-alpha? What in the world is that? We don't ask for help. We don't do that. We don't wallow. We don't cry. We don't feel as Black men. And I think, this is just me, I think a big part of it, and we don't want to talk about it, because oftentimes Black women, and this is a conversation that I'll have one day on my channel, how we are often used as tools of oppression towards our own men. I will talk about that another time, and that's a little bit for a lot of Black women, right? But I usually, I think what happens with Black women is because we observe the world and say, well, this is a patriarchy, right? So we look and we think that our men have the same advantages as other men simply because of their genitals. And that is not true.
No.
You know what I mean? So how much would you say, okay, let's talk about the factors, in your opinion, as a Black male who is promotes therapy. What are the factors that contribute to the increase of Black male deletion, self-deletion?
That's an excellent question. Besides what we're talking about anxiety and depression and not feeling understood, those things tend to lead to not being able to function in life. And so that will bring people down, especially, and I tend to see that in younger men too, younger men who are younger fathers. They really want to do so well, with their child, because they felt like they didn't do so well with themselves, only to feel like they've failed. And then they take more drastic measures to hurt or possibly commit suicide, to hurt themselves or commit suicide. But I think it's just an accumulation over time. An accumulation, just like any other accumulation of injuries, over time are just going to wear you out and kill you. These are an accumulation of psychological and probably physical injuries over time, because with the mind and body being one. And that's another thing too. That's another one of those assumptions. We're so used to taking problems and deconstructing it and saying, okay, what's the problem with the mind? Okay, let's put the body over here. No, we got to keep them together because they work as one. That's why we have to get the physical first to make sure that's not the cause of anything. Once we rule that out, okay, now we're at the high mental health. Let's get the work point.
Wow. but they're all connected.
Yes, it's all one. And I think the better we understand that, the better we'll be, and the less stigma that we'll see over the course of time. But in terms of being male, you also don't want to feel ostracized, because with men we have we're very hierarchical, and we do that because the hierarchy is needed, because that's how we maintain order amongst ourselves. And so you lose the link, it's like losing a link in the chain. You lose a link in the chain and the whole chain breaks. And so if you're the guy, who has mental health issues, we do talk about that. I mean, we won't push you in this day and age. We won't push you away,
Right.
but we will say, I think something's wrong with here. And so we end up trying to overcompensate with each other, overcompensate for each other, and in that way, we feel like we're helping one another. Now, that's not always going to be the case because we can easily enable each other too. I'm sure all the guys on the corner, getting high, all think they're helping each other too. Whereas I'm sure they're not thinking about, we're helping each other self-medicate to get away from our problems because our lives are in our homes, and yet we're all out here on the street corner. And then there's always that feeling of tension, like violence can erupt at any time.
Okay.
So I hope that is a better, a more expansive way to explain how it feels to be a man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. You talked about enabling. So as it comes to therapy, and you and I, I'm talking. I'm a black woman. You're a black man. So, if you could tell me this. Okay, so I don't feel it's enough for us to just say to our men, you need to go to therapy, right?
No.
That's just kind of not how that happens, especially if they have never been introduced to him. So one of the things that I found out working in child welfare is you'll be surprised, a lot of our children are introduced to therapy. A lot of black men are introduced to therapy very young because working in child welfare, you find that a lot of them were assigned case workers at a very young age, whether it's someone reported something going on in the family, and so they put maybe some wraparound services in place. So instead of taking the child out the home, they bring the services to the home to support the child. So what I'm finding is that a lot of a lot of black men have been introduced to some form of therapy very young, very young, because their family may have been under CPS investigation of some sort. So it was one of the requirements that they've had. So their introduction to it may not have been the most pleasant, right? The introduction is one of a threat. It is them versus us. They are trying to remove us from our mother, from our siblings, from our home. So the experience with the idea of therapy wasn't a positive one. Fast forward years later, you're talking men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, okay? Maybe never had an experience, or if they had one, it wasn't a really good or positive experience around therapy. So now these are the men we have to date, Curtis. These are the men that we're coupled with. These are the men that we are bearing children with. These are the men that we are getting married to. And we observe and say, okay, this is beyond me, right? And I'm just going to say this to the woman. You might have the bomb sex, but sometimes that's not even enough.
No.
Okay? Your sex might be bomb, okay? I'm not knocking you. But that might not even be enough, because it gets to a point where you now have to work with that individual. So my question to you as a man, you're in your 50s, you've dated. When, as black women who are dating black men, and we observe that there's like a deeper issue, how do we encourage our men to get help beyond our good loving? Okay? How do we encourage them to get help without further damaging them?
Well, you just hit the nail right on the head. That I think always works is first is to know that is let us know that we're loved, and to keep giving us that good loving. Because if anytime I notice this with anytime you put the brakes on good loving, things just fall apart. And also, we also learn that good loving alone isn't going to cure everything. How I tend to frame it when talking to women, especially, is that therapy, more than anything else, is a commitment to yourself and your own mental hygiene. And so if you're committed to me, then I'm committed to you, and I'm committed to myself, then would you consider a greater commitment to yourself, knowing that I am also committed to you, not just committed but devoted to you, and I'll be right here. I'll be right here with you. No, it doesn't scare me, and just to let them know, tell them the truth. Whether it's a soothing tone, soothing tones work better than the screaming and yelling matches, obviously. But just let people know that I am here for you, and yes, I understand. Or I may not have gone through that, but I can certainly empathize with it. And the most important thing is, let's get you the help you need. Let's get you the clinical help you need. Let's do some of the non-clinical things that we can do at home, like the diet, exercise, make sure we get the physicals, going out more, planning more dates, planning more nights out, planning to balance out the day with more positive things, more positive rewards too. Most times we work our butts off, we come home and we just plot down. And so there's no reward for that hard work. And I think that also can lend itself to depression as well. Because, I have to get up tomorrow and repeat the same thing. I did so well and there's no reward, clap. Okay, next day, I've done so well, no reward, clap. After a while, you're just going to flatline,
Yeah.
And so that's when it helps to really know that you're understood and that you're loved. And I would say, look at the love in the chat, right there. This is a loving, caring environment. And that's why I always try to push the fact that I think the responsible use of social media, which is exactly what this is a perfect example of, responsible use of social media in a venue where we don't always see that. We tend to see the exact opposite more often than not. But the positivity, I tend to try to use that as an impetus to say, I think you need to make a commitment to yourself by going to therapy. Or if you've been to therapy, then you need to recommit to making a greater commitment to yourself by going back to therapy.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk it out from there. But as long as I know it's as long as I'm straightforward, but I don't sound like some clinical robot who just stepped out of an OR, and the unlearned parts of me too, the different personality traits.
Yeah.
That was okay when I was doing surgery, but not okay in the world of mental health. Not at all. That will drive people away. And that will make people not want to come back. In which case, I look at that as, looking at myself. I don't judge other people like that. But I was like, Kurt, if you make that mistake, then you failed. Then you failed the people that you signed up. Nobody told you this. You came this of your own accord. You organically grew into mental health. I'm learning to, and always have to give myself room to do that. And although by this point, I've been doing so long that even though it might be difficult still, because there are some things that are still difficult, but one of the things that's become much easier is to take constructive criticism and and most importantly, in my situation, it was to learn the difference between blaming and assigning responsibility for things that in my life. So instead of saying, this person hurt me and now I'm angry and I want to hurt this person back because I blame them for hurting me. Now it's like, okay, this person's action, makes them responsible for the injury that was caused me. But what is my responsibility now? And my responsibility now is not to be mad at them, it's to get help for myself.
Yeah.
That person can come back to that person, and I'll probably come back in a much better mood.
Yeah. I know someone that tells a story all the time to me of they were married and they were talking to someone about their spouse and just how toxic their spouse is, and some of the things that she was doing, and the person sat and they listened to them, right? And it's like, okay, wow, sounds terrible, and let them get it all out. And when they were all finished, brought it right back to them and said, now I'm concerned about what's going on with you, that you would remain in a situation that toxic.
Yes.
So it always comes back to you at the end of the day. Like, we can blame, and don't get me wrong, yes, there are people who do damage, and they should not be let off the hook for it.
No.
But you have to ask yourself, why was I complicit? Why was I participating in that? Why was I connecting or attaching myself to an individual that I knew was toxic? That's where the real work is. The
Yes.
real work is not trying to convince everybody that that person is an animal, or trying to feel better about your connection to that person. So now you find everything to to get it off of you. Look at what they did. Look at them. They're this type of person. The real work is in why you stayed connected to that person. And the reason why that's the real work is because if you do not get to that place, you're just going to move on to the same energy with a different face.
Yes.
You're going to find yourself right back in the same situation with a different person. So that's why I say that's where the real work is. That's where the real growth is really seeing the part that you played in it, right? And how you can, do the work on yourself so that you can move forward and not subject yourself to that level of toxicity again. And one of the things that you said, I asked about the woman's part, like the woman participation in, getting our men to get the help that they need. I mean, our men are deleting themselves at high. And here's the funny thing. There's a lot of Black men who are still among us, who are living. And if you talk to them and they are willing to be open with you, they have had the thought of deleting themselves.
Yes.
They may not have went through with it. I saw, I think it was a TikTok going around, and it was like a question, how many years has it been, or how long has it been since you tried to delete yourself, right? So for me, it's like, when was the last time you thought about it? I think that's a conversation to be had, because we wait until the act actually happened. But there are a lot of Black men amongst us, and we're seeing them. These are our brothers, these are our cousins, these are our nephews, and they are contemplating it. Okay, and they are looking for some sort of support. And one of the things that when you were talking about the woman and the positivity and the optimism in encouraging that individual to seek the help, a lot of women, and this is a new thing now, it's not my job to heal any man, right? And that is true, right? But if you are coupled with that individual, you play an important role in that healing process.
Oh, yes.
Yes, because you are probably one of the very few people that they trust. So for you to take the attitude of, no, that's their responsibility, I think that is sick. I think that is sick. I find that to be very disgusting. This is somebody that you are coupled with. So even though you might not be the healing for that person, you might not be the balm in Gilead for that person, but you definitely have a very vital role to play in that healing process. And I wish more Black women would really take that approach. And when I say, when it comes to our men, it don't even necessarily have to be someone, like you said, you talk about relationships a lot. It doesn't have to be intimate. You can be the aunt that plays a big role in your nephew's life. Yes. Right. And you can't sit up there because he's 25 and you're like, well, that's not my job. But he looks to you for consolation. He trusts you. He trusts your opinion, your words of wisdom. So for you to take the stance of, that's not my, job, Black men need to heal themselves, I'm like, no, we play an important role in that if these are the men that we're coupled with. What do you say to that?
I agree. We complement each other. As you know, how we say we're better together. We're better together. Well, our terminology. We complement each other when we're at our very best. Whereas when we're at our very worst, we're trying to compensate for one another, and we drive each other crazy and we push each other apart. But that complementary nature and that understanding and that being able to talk, like you and I, and tell this to the audience, you and I were able to have this talk, drop of a dime, and the reason being is because of trust.
Yes.
Trust built up over time. Okay, so that's what I think is most important love and trust. This is a loving environment.
Right.
This that's right here. This is a very loving environment.
Right.
And it's also one in which you can build trust. And you certainly are a dutiful and responsible person. So of course, people are going to gravitate to you,
Mm-hmm.
to talk to you and to come to space. And honestly, I think this right here represents the future of any issues of gender war, gender divide, the global gender gap. You know, some things which get ignored on a global scale. This is going to be the way to do it
I
because
agree. I
this has the
agree.
reach. Exactly. So so again, shout out to the show and shout out to you for moving over to the YouTube platform, because this does I, I'm certain that this is a wave of the future. You know,
Oh, thank you for saying that, because one of the things that the stance that I've taken as far as the gender war, and even if I bring someone on to speak to the gender war, it has to be someone who is speaking of it from a perspective of balance, that we need to meet, in the middle, and have a conversation. um I am of the mind that, you don't necessarily have to choose a side.
no.
I don't feel that because I am a black woman that I automatically have to get on the side of black women,
No.
right? In this situation, because I know that there are issues with us as black women that we need to continue to work on amongst ourselves and along with our men. And I also can acknowledge that our men also have work to do, right?
Yes.
So when you're able to observe that and say, oh, no, 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 both we have a
Mhm.
lot of work to do as a collective, right?
Right.
When
Right.
you're able to observe that, then you're able to stay above the mess, right? You're able to give yourself more of an aerial view of the
Mhm.
situation and say, okay, no, no, but it requires a certain level of mental fortitude and spiritual fortitude
Yes.
to do so.
Mhm.
Because, in this space in social media, it is very tempting oftentimes to get sucked into what people will call drama. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And when I say drama, I'm talking about the so-called gender war. That's what I'm
Yes.
specifically what I'm speaking to. So
Mhm.
I want to see more of us in this space talk about, okay, I got it. What do we need to do now?
Yes.
Because what I find, a lot of the conversations that we're having, I was on Ashan's channel not too long ago, and
Mhm.
we were playing around, and I said, I need us to accept that the hymen is gone. The hymen
Mhm.
is gone. It's not coming back. So
Yes.
can we stop having a conversation about the hymen and
Mhm.
what a person could have, would have, should have done to maintain their hymen and keep their hymen intact? Okay, the
Yeah.
hymen is gone. The babies are here.
Mhm.
The divorce has happened. What do we do to
Mhm.
move forward from it? What does that look like moving forward?
Mhm.
Why are we still trying to exist in this time loop, right? And I
Mhm.
really believe it's because oftentimes we don't really know, we don't have anything to talk about, and so we keep talking about the same things all the time, right? And so it keeps us in this cycle of
Yeah.
focus on the problem, and we never get to discussing the
Mhm.
solution. So yes,
Mhm.
okay, the system messed up. She
Mhm.
did not choose right. The brother messed up. He did not choose right. Now, how do we equip these people with tools
Mhm.
going forward so that their vetting process and their decision making process looks a little bit more fruitful and a little bit more healthy
Mhm.
going forward? Because just focusing on the fact that they've made these bad decisions, it's not getting us anywhere. So I appreciate you saying that. I want to make sure that I let people know. I put the link in the chat. If you guys want to come up and have this conversation with us, feel free. We have a little while left to go. I'm not going to keep Curtis here forever, but if you guys want to join, I'm going to put the link in again. And so feel free to come up at any time. You guys know you all are welcome. The space here, not necessarily social media, but this little piece of YouTube on this platform, when you enter into this stage, it is a safe place. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. I'm not gonna be out here talking about YouTube is a safe space. Once
Mhm.
you enter onto this stage, it is a safe space. And so all are welcome to come. But I want to read this comment real quick, Curtis. It says, if a man lose his job, do you think he will feel better about talking about it or getting a new job? Maybe both. You want to
Uh,
answer that?
both. Okay, because I'll tell you from my own experience. I mean, because even though I am one person, I think that sometimes we use anecdotal a little too much.
Okay.
I may be one person, but that one person comes with a lot of experiences,
Mhm.
which makes it a case study and not an anecdote. Okay. So, but I'm sorry. What was the question again?
I'm gonna put it right back up for you. It says,
Thank you.
if
Okay.
a man lose his job, do you think he will feel better by talking about it or
Mhm.
getting a new job or maybe both?
Oh, well, shoot. Oh, my goodness, both. You know what I mean? Because losing a job, as a man, we're gonna get angry. We're gonna get really, really angry, and that's when we're gonna need the help of the woman in our life. You know, baby, calm down. You know, otherwise we're gonna be looking for something to hit. You know, to be quite honest, I personally am somebody who likes to hit the heavy bag. You know, if I'm that angry, for instance, if I just lost my job today and didn't know why and couldn't resolve anything and had no resolution to work with,
Mm-hmm.
I would go downstairs and start punching and wail on the heavy bag until I wound down some. And once I wound down some, then I might be able to converse with someone about it and a friend, but I won't be overblown over the top. And then and that tends to take the anxiety down and reinforces the strength in your bonds with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I can reinforce the strength with myself, with my own butt, and get back out there and get my butt another job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yes, so yeah, you can do one or the other, but both, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's definitely going to be more synergistic. You
Yeah,
know,
I'm glad that you said both because I was like, I would think both, but what I'm learning, Curtis, and I'm just gonna be honest,
mhm,
I'm learning that men really process a lot of things very different from us.
yes.
And I know, like sometimes I'll listen to, yeah, very different. And I think I am in a space where I'm starting to accept that, like
Mhm,
really accept that, not just say I've accepted it, but really accept it.
yes.
But because specifically in this space, I think oftentimes when we have conversations or women and men are dialogue, like they're having dialogue with each other,
Mhm,
I see a lot of times how women are really trying to project their nature onto men.
mhm,
And I like when I have these conversations and men come in, whether it's my comment section or wherever, and remind me that, Hanifa, women might be showing more grace in this area. So it might be a little easier for a woman to think that way, right? I
mhm,
appreciate that. I appreciate my fiance does that very well with me, right? He'll say, well, yeah, you can do that. You can say that. And it really brings me back to my center that, it's just a reminder that, men are just, they're not seen the
mhm,
same way as we are, and they
mhm.
don't see themselves the same way,
No,
right? And
no.
we have to be careful of projecting our nature
Mhm,
onto men. Well, this is how I would do it. Well, a man's wiring and a man's socialization and a man's experience is very different from yours. Okay.
yes.
And that matters because a lot of how we're socialized as women informs the behaviors that some of us exhibit.
Yeah.
Same thing with men. So if we're having two different socializations, then
Mhm,
our reaction and our perception of what is happening to us and how we navigate that is not going to look the same. And that was very
no.
hard for me to accept because
It
I was
is.
of the mindset of, oh, stop. If I
Mhm,
could do it, you can, and it's like, not
mhm,
always.
mhm,
There are way
definitely.
more resources, and I want to get into the resources piece around the therapy.
Mhm,
But there are more resources, available resources for women When
Yeah.
women fall on hard times, we don't even want to get into homeless shelters. I mean, there's just so much services to accommodate women in this society versus men.
Yes.
Um, and I think that also makes men a little bit apprehensive around seeking out
Yeah.
services, because because when they do, they gotta jump through hoops
Mm-hmm.
to get there. Like, for example, I'll give you one and then you can speak to this. If a man is going through DV, domestic violence, right? It's difficult for him. It'll probably be much difficult for him to get into a domestic violence shelter.
I tell you, the last time I looked up these figures, there is one men's domestic violence shelter for every 20,000 women's domestic violence shelters. I think it was. Please don't quote me on that, because I'm trying to cite a source that I read maybe several years ago. But yes, there are very few. And as a survivor of domestic violence myself, I can tell you that when I was looking for a place to escape to get away from the physical violence, found there was none. And when there isn't one like that, basically your shelter is to end up being taken into police custody, and then either put in jail, or find you a men. They'll help find the men's shelter, and they may take you there, or at least provide you with directions there. But the point is that they want to try to get to separate, especially if it's a man or a woman, in a domestic violence situation. The policy is still, regardless of what the law is, the policy is still, get the man out of there.
Yeah.
And I do have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
Because we are big, strong creatures capable of doing a lot of damage, and that would be the last thing. We would make things worse. I think I remember I cracked a joke one time in one of the posts. A young lady had asked men if we could be more vulnerable, and I said, "What the hell? What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? Start World War III? Any more vulnerable, and you're gonna have some emotional men fighting more, beating each other up on the corners more, smoking weed and drinking on the corners more, acting out more, and far less effective men. We kind of have to reel it in. We have to reel in those urges, especially those testosterone induced urges.
Yeah. You said if they want us to, if they want you guys to start World War III, you said?
Yes.
Vulnerability and black men.
Be emotional.
Ma'am. Do you know what you're asking for?
Yeah, exactly. Hanifa, can I and we can do this as a little experiment.
Sure.
Maybe see myself on the camera. Can you tell what kind of mood I am just by my facial expression?
No.
Okay, that's one of the things that I find very interesting, is that women generally cannot tell what our moods are based on men's facial expressions. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers to communication between men and women, all the way across the board. And so when we talk about solutions, to me it says, okay, well, the solution becomes very simple. I have to be more open with you. I have to be more honest with you. And I have to assess how I trust you and how you trust me. And is there a road for me to be that open with you so that I can tell you what I'm feeling? Because us being different genders and therefore different genetically, that's not something that you can tell. Whereas men, we can tell, what mood you're in by your facial expressions far more. But we men, we tend to have far flatter facial expressions. So you don't know if this guy's a happy father, or you don't know if he's a potential assailant. And so I've heard women talk about that a lot as well. And I'm glad that we can do little things like this, just a simple little experiment like that, so that people can see just how drastically different we perceive things. And if I could add a little bit of genetics to it, all men, we're all 99.9% genetically identical. All women are all 99.9% genetically identical.
Wait,
but men,
Curtis, you sound a little robotic. I'm not
Oh,
sure what's going on. Sorry.
okay, that's okay. How about now? Can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
that's better. Go ahead.
So men, we're all 99.9% genetically identical, and the same is true of women. But of men and women, we're only 98.5% identical.
Mhm.
And that 1.5% is what makes up all the difference between us. So that 1.5% might sound so small, but look at how vast the scope is, and look at how important it is to life. So to try to go in and micromanage, or to try to microanalyze small things such as facial expression, I think we get a lot out of it. I think, and I hope the audience got a lot out of what we just did just then. No, Curtis,
Yeah.
I can't tell what your mood is from your facial expression. The mood I'm elated. I'm ecstatic because I get to have these conversations
Yeah.
without shame,
Yeah.
and I get to share. And I know that there's always help in the sharing when I'm shared with or when I share. And that level of courage, because that's a learned level of courage that I had to grow into. But if it can be used to truly help someone, simply by me just being honest,
Hmm.
then it makes it all worthwhile.
So I have
And
a question. Is
mhm.
do you think um men picking a therapist is it the same like woman picking, I know this is going to be like woman picking a gynecologist? Like,
Mhm.
for example, woman might say, okay, I would prefer a female gynecologist because I am a female. Do
Yes.
men approach therapy the same way? Do you think that men specifically want other men because of the level of vulnerability involved, or um, do men maybe prefer a woman because of the level of vulnerability involved, and maybe they may think that women handle that a little better?
Mhm. It's one or the other, because people, we start out with that in the very beginning. Like in the very beginning, I wanted a male therapist because I thought that male therapist would identify with me better. Boy, was I wrong. Okay, so fortunately, we get a chance to choose. We're not locked into. That's one thing about therapy. Might go through bad relationships in life, but therapy, we're never locked into a bad relationship. And so there's always a chance to try someone else, because it may take someone, depending on what's going on with you, it may take a different personality type or a different person altogether to get through to you. I find that I tend to respond well to men who are within my age range, up to 10
Okay.
years older than me.
Okay.
Anything outside of that sphere, I don't respond as well to.
Mhm.
And I respond well to women who are also older than me as
Okay.
well. Okay. But and so if we take older men and older women, I find that I respond better to the older women,
Okay.
because the men, we're still going to be silent men. You know what I mean? Whereas the male female interaction is going to be more intimate, and it's going to involve more emotions, which is going to cause us men to have to take down the mask. And there we go. Here at that point, just hit the accelerator. Because this is where the ride gets fun. This is where the healing begins. But yes, but you have to have that, and I can't stress that enough more than anything else. You have to be able to build good relationships, and you have to be willing to trust, even if you're not feeling like you want to trust. You have to be willing to trust. And even if you feel run over, that willingness to trust, you'll eventually form good relationships. Like the team I have is great. And that's also why I like the position, the certified peer specialist position, because when you start therapy now, one of the people you see is your certified peer specialist. That person has gone through therapy too. And they've come out of it. Now they're working. They want to give something back. So that's somebody that you can automatically identify with right off the bat, and then get your referral for therapy, for non-medicinal therapy, as well as a referral for psychiatry in case you need medicinal management. And that team will be available to you for as long as you're in that healthcare system. and it helps to build good, strong relationships. That
Mm-hmm.
and it lets you know that you're not being judged negatively. It becomes a no judge zone, and that's as safe gets. You know?
So I saw I wanted to bring up this question here because that was one of the questions I was going to ask.
Mhm.
But he said, is there Lionheart says, is there an end goal to therapy?
Mm. Uh, that's an interesting question. Well, the end goal of therapy is to not feel as bad as you felt. So if we take my situation, right, where in which I'm suffering from crippling anxiety to the point where I can't get anything done,
Mm-hmm.
my end goal, which should be a short-term goal, not an end goal, but my short-term end goal should be how much therapy do I need to go to and how do I need to be medically managed such that I don't feel that anxiety stopping me and freezing me in my tracks anymore. So it's we can do ourselves a disservice by trying to think it out across the course of our lives. But like with everything that's as complicated as these issues, because there's a lot to learn in the meantime, and a lot to process, so much to process. And Matt spoke about that earlier in one of the comments. But needing that time and being able to take that time to heal is absolutely necessary. But I think it has to be done in baby steps. If you try to jump, it's like jumping across a canyon. You're going to Wile E. Coyote and hit the bottom every single time out. And nobody wants active brand therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but little steps at a time, little steps at a time, little steps at a time, little steps at a time. And in a couple months, you'll look back and realize, wow, I did make giant leaps, but I had to make a commitment to be patient in the beginning.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna start to wrap up this conversation around therapy, but there was another question I had. Um oh yeah, I was gonna share something. Like, okay, so one of the things that I would say that spirit kind of showed me, specifically when it comes to our like men, black men in particular, and even ourselves. One of the therapeutic things I think we need to utilize a lot more of is gentle touch with each
Yes.
other. And it does not necessarily have to be intimate.
Mhm.
And I think the reason why it came up in my spirit is because a lot of us come from emotionally void
Yes.
environments void of affection, environments void of like emotional expression,
Mhm.
healthy emotion. Let me be clear on that.
Yes.
Because emotions are, they're all, anger is an emotion. So
Right.
healthy emotional expression. And so that was something that spirit showed me, in not just being gentle with yourself, but gentle touch, right?
Yes.
Hugging each other
Mhm.
more. If you are with someone, gently rubbing them, giving them maybe a gentle scalp massage, a gentle, massage on the back. And the key word here is gentle.
Oh.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because I find, and this is even including myself, a lot of us crave that. A lot of us are missing that in our lives, that gentle touch. Gentle touch. I mean, you'll be surprised how far that can go. Someone can
Yes.
be having a stressful day. They have a whole lot of tension in their shoulders, in their body, and a gentle touch too, even verbally, how we speak
Mhm.
to each other. I'm of the mindset, and I'm still working on this even in my own everyday life.
Mhm.
Um, Black people, if you are coupled with each other, if you're a black man and a black woman coupled with each other, you have to create, and we're talking about therapy, you
Mhm.
have to create healing environments. Your
Yeah.
home needs to be a healing space where when you speak to each other, you speak to each other with respect, right?
Mhm.
And with honor, right? You don't tear each other down.
Yeah.
You support each other, you wait each other out. And I had to learn this because my boo is way better at it than me. Just kind of letting people go, right? And then when they're ready to solicit your help, just being there. But kind of like allowing people the space to fit. I mean, I'm learning that from him. But creating safe spaces for each other, because we have to acknowledge the society that we are existing in. So imagine my man going out into a world that is hostile towards him and then coming home to a hostile home environment.
Oof.
What in the world is that? So we have to be cognizant. We have to be cognizant of that and how we deal with each other. We have to deal with each other in a healing and healthy manner all the time. How are we speaking to each other? How are we embracing each other? Are we physically trying to harm each other, or are we gently touching each other and hugging each other and caressing each other? All of these things are therapeutic. All of these things are de-stressors. All of these things help with our mental health. So I say this all the time. If we are coupled with another Black person, we must always approach, even our relationships have to be approached in a healing manner. Yes. When a problem comes up, how are we tackling this? Are we tackling the problem, or are we trying to tackle each other and avoid the problem? So there's a lot of ways in which we could practice healing, and use therapeutic tools with the way we engage each other. Like you said, how I speak to you, how I speak to people when they come onto this platform, the information that I put out, how I decide to talk about certain topics, what I say about my people in these spaces, how I talk about them. All of that matters to me, because I know that we have a lot of healing to do. So I am either going to contribute to the destruction, or I am going to counter the destruction with healing. It's no different. And you talk a lot about relationships. In all our relationships, as far as Black people in this hostile society, we have to constantly have that in the forefront of our minds. How we do friendships, how we do relationships, how we interact with our family dynamics. All of it must come from a place of healing. When we apologize, how often we forgive, when do we reconcile, if we reconcile, and if we don't reconcile, what does that look like? So all of these things must be considered if we're talking about therapy and healing, because when you talk about therapy, essentially you are talking about healing. It is a form of healing. Therapy is a tool of healing. That's just one tool that we're talking about today, and we could talk about many more. But I wanted to just kind of get that out, because it was in me. It was in me. I wanted to put that out there. But go ahead if you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I'm glad you said all that, because all of this is still a learning experience. And that's also what I wanted to stress to the audience as well. A lot of people tend to think that in these fields that we're a lot of people are still cure-minded. Oh, okay, I'll take this pill and everything will be all right from there on. And we don't live in that day and age of medicine, if we ever have, to tell you the truth. But that's why it has to be a slow but sure process that you have to be mindful of the entire way through. And is it a burden? It can feel like a burden in the very beginning, but that's where you have to gauge and take your own emotional temperature and see how much love you have to give. Some days you may be too worn out or too tapped out, Like I know when we finish here, I will be exhausted. And I will need at least an hour for myself.
Yeah.
Before I start returning those phone calls.
Me too.
Yeah, I'd like to let the audience know is that we will be returning those phone calls that we missed. But we are going to take time for ourselves. And that's one of the biggest coping strategies too, is including yourself in the equation. Don't take yourself out of the equation that is life. Include yourself in it, because if you remove you as a variable, well, your variable just goes to zero. you've essentially made yourself worthless by excluding yourself. And as you talked about earlier, meeting people where they're at, and then trying to get them to de-escalate down to something calm and reasonable because you're reasonable. So yeah, those are the main two things at that level of communication before therapy and during the time you're in therapy, and even if you decide to leave therapy, you still have those coping skills, and also knowing, as the young lady was saying earlier, knowing that you can always go back. So that I think that paradigm helps people a lot, and knowing that, and also knowing that you have a clinical team at your essentially almost at your disposal. That will take down the anxiety, and that will lift the depression a lot, because you know exactly where your help is. It's pick the phone, dial a number, and there you go. You're back on you're back on track healing. So that's why I like the therapeutic model too. And I guess we should make sure we clarify this, that what Hanif and I are talking about tonight is called the biopsychosocial spiritual model for mental health, where we pay attention to the person's biology, and that's why the person needs to have a physical first to make sure there's nothing physically going on that's causing mental illness or symptoms of mental illness. And then there's the psychological, which is the crux of what we're talking about. And then there's the social, there's the environment around us that can trigger us in ways that we might not even be able to imagine. And then finally, the spiritual. So we've talked about all these things separately, but in mental health, it is called the biopsychosocial spiritual model, because you have to take into account all of these important factors about every individual, so that you can actually see to that individual, as opposed to treating everybody like they're chicks in a basket. They all collect the same note. We don't. We do need individualized care, and we have to be responsible enough to take responsibility for our part in our care as well. Which 90% of the time is just showing up. It's just making your appointments on time. You have to make that commitment to yourself that you will make your appointments on time. That's all. So I hope that helps people to realize that while it is a big commitment, it is not a hard commitment. It's not as hard as we might think, but we won't see that until we get the ball rolling. And the first commitment that we have to have, especially as adults, it has to be that commitment to ourselves, in my opinion. It has to be to ourselves before we can fully commit and be devoted towards each other and everyone else in our lives.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna check my I know Lionheart, he had said schizophrenia, something hardcore like that. Probably need lifelong, therapy.
You do.
Yeah. Quantum is just giving her 100 to us. Tiff says good teachings. Lionheart says salute to Hanifa and Brother Ball, great convo. And then Arshan says, good point, Arshan. He says, and people keep acting like relationships are easy. Yeah, when we have all this going on. And I also think that we make the mistake of thinking that there is one blueprint for making relationships work, when you're dealing with people who are coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, and also have different wiring. To just make a blanket, if you do this, it should work, and then you have people who have done it and it didn't work. So that's a whole other conversation. But I want you to go ahead and give your closing remarks so that we can start wrapping up. I know that you are an advocate of therapy, as we have seen if you were listening throughout the conversation. You're also a Black male who is an advocate of therapy, which I think is pretty dope. What do you want to leave the people with? What do you want the people to leave here with?
3 words. There's always hope. Always. Okay. And the truth is if you're physically ill, you might not hesitate to go to the doctor, because you might have an idea of how bad you're feeling because of your physical illness. Well, a mental illness is no different. If you have a cold, or if you have schizophrenia, or flu or something like that, you may need to go to the doctor. Schizophrenia, you're definitely going to need to go to a doctor. And just like there are physical afflictions, which may last us our entire lives as well. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Natasha. So yes, that's the one thing I want people to always remember is there's always hope, always, always, always. And if you need a receipt, call me Mr. Receipt. and look at the ease with which I'm able to talk to you about this now, right? And with no shame and no stigma, because there doesn't need to be. If I broke my arm, I'd be in the hospital getting a cast on it. Well, if I feel like I'm broken, well, we can go to the hospital for the same thing, if necessary. But the best thing is to have a good healthcare team around you, so that if something goes wrong, you do have specific resources to call at any time of the day or night, so that you never have to be alone, and that this should help to decrease, or at least that's one thing that we always hope. We hope that helps to decrease the amount of time that people spend isolated, feeling alone, and therefore at increased risk for self-deletion.
Yeah. So thank you. Yes, I like the way that you ended that. There is always hope. Always hope. Thank you, Curtis, for being here with me. I'm sure you'll be back again. I will definitely be inviting you back on. We have a variety of topics to discuss, sir. But thank you for lending me your time this evening. You did not have to. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you were here, giving us your energy and your time and allowing us to pick your brain a little bit. So I appreciate you as usual, sir. And to the people in the chat, thank you for coming and supporting Curtis and I, this conversation. Thank you for asking your questions. And thank you guys for always supporting. Share the information. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Make sure you press the like button. Until next time, which is next Friday, and make sure you guys tune in next Friday. Next Friday is going to be a very good conversation as well. I am going to be here with my son's stepmother, and we are going to be discussing the important role that women play in the co-parenting dynamic and in blended families. She is the new wife of my ex-husband, and we are going to have a conversation because I think the world needs to see that these things are possible. And so make sure you guys tune in next Friday. That is going to be a very healthy, much needed conversation. So until next time, guys, I will see you guys next Friday right here, 5 p.m. live. Peace.
Thank you. Peace and love. Thank you.